If you're putting castor oil on your feet and then layering other things on top of it, hoping it'll work better, we need to talk. I'm seeing this more and more, people mixing castor oil with all sorts of things, magnesium, essential oils, even things like DMSO, trying to boost the effect. And listen, sometimes it might actually help, but other times you're either irritating your skin or doing absolutely nothing extra at all. And the frustrating part is once you start layering products, you can't really tell what's working and what just sounds like it could in theory. So in this episode, I'm breaking down what you can safely combine, what you need to be careful with, and what you should not be mixing casually with castor oil at all. All right, the biggest mistake I'm seeing right now is not that people are using castor oil incorrectly. It's how they're thinking about what happens when they start adding other things to it. Now, most people are treating this like layering skincare. You put one thing on, then another, and the assumption is that you're just stacking benefits on top of each other. But your skin doesn't work like that. It's not just a surface, it's a barrier, and at the same time, it's a delivery system. So the moment you start combining things, you're not just adding effects, you're changing how everything is absorbed and how deep it goes and how your skin responds to it. It's the reality of using anything topically, and that's where things can go in completely different directions, because some combinations will sit mostly at the surface and give you a mild temporary effect. Some will increase absorption just enough to actually help. And then there are others that can push things deeper or irritate the skin in a way that ends up making your symptoms worse instead of better. I'm looking at you, DMSO. So when you see people saying this worked great for me and someone else saying I tried that and it made things worse, both of those experiences are completely valid. They're just not talking about the same interaction. And that's why this isn't as simple as just mixing things together and hoping for a stronger effect. So what I want to do is break this down in a way that actually makes sense and give you the potential benefits balanced with the potential drawbacks of the most common substances people are asking me about in the comment sections. We need fair balance here, so I'm going to give you some of the ones that I do recommend and others that I'm a little nervous about, quite frankly. So let's start with combinations that are probably the least controversial and the ones people are using the most. Magnesium is probably the #1 thing that I get asked about, specifically magnesium oil layered with castor oil. Now on the surface, this one makes sense. Magnesium can help with muscle relaxation and nerve irritation, and castor oil is being used more for circulation and lymphatic movement. So the idea here is combine them and maybe you get a better result, and sometimes you might. But here's what you need to understand. Magnesium oil is already known to cause irritation for some people. That tingling, itching, sometimes even burning sensation is not uncommon. And part of the confusion here is that not all magnesium oils are the same strength. Most over-the-counter magnesium oils are fairly concentrated, often around 30% magnesium chloride. But how that feels on your skin can vary a lot from person to person. Some people tolerate it without any issue, others feel significant stinging or irritation, especially if their skin is already sensitive. And I mean, this makes sense. You know, you can have, I always say, you can have 20 people in a room and give them all the same thing, and every single one of them will have a different experience or interaction with the product. So when you layer castor oil over it, you're not just sealing it in some neutral way. You're potentially changing how long that magnesium is sitting on the skin and how your skin is reacting to it. So if you're already someone who reacts to magnesium, layering castor oil on top isn't necessarily going to calm that down. In some cases, it can actually make it feel much more intense and lasts longer. And this is where I'm going to say something that people just don't love hearing. There isn't one exact amount or one exact strength that works for everyone. So if you're new to magnesium oil, start light, start low. A small amount applied to a small area and see how your skin responds. Some people even dilute it with water at first to reduce irritation. And then if your skin tolerates magnesium well and you're already using it without issues, then layering castor oil on top is one of those combinations that's generally reasonable to experiment with. But I would not start both at the same time. Use magnesium on its own first, see how your skin responds, and then add castor oil later so you actually know what changed. And remember, do a small patch test. You'll just apply a little bit in a very small area, see how your skin reacts. And the next category I get asked about a lot is essential oils. And this is where people start getting a little more creative. You'll see things like peppermint or lavender, frankincense, sometimes blends of all of them, but they're all being added to castor oil. And essential oils are very different from something like magnesium. They're highly concentrated usually, and even when they're diluted, they can still trigger irritation or allergic reactions, especially with repeated use. Peppermint is probably one of the most common here in this group. It contains menthol, which activates cold receptors in the skin, and that's what gives you that cooling sensation. Again, it's the same reason that people just use plain menthol. And for some, that can feel like relief, especially if you're dealing with burning or tingling. But that cooling effect is a sensory signal. It doesn't necessarily mean that inflammation is going down or that anything deeper is being corrected. In some cases, especially with sensitive skin, it can actually be irritating. Lavender is usually used for its calming properties, and some people find it soothing, and there is some evidence that it can have mild anti-inflammatory effects. But again, we're talking about relatively subtle surface level effects for most people. Now, frankincense is also one that comes up a lot because it does have some real science behind it. It comes from boswellia resin, and it contains compounds called boswellic acids that have been shown to interact with inflammatory pathways in the body. Specifically, they can inhibit enzymes like 5-lipoxygenase, which plays a role in producing inflammatory compounds. There have been studies mostly using oral boswellia extracts that show benefit in conditions like osteoarthritis and other inflammatory disorders. So when people say frankincense has anti-inflammatory properties, it's not completely made up, but it's also not the whole story either. Most of that research is based on standardized extracts taken internally, not the essential oil applied to the skin. And it can also vary quite a bit in composition, just like the other ones. So we just don't have strong evidence that topical frankincense penetrates deeply enough to significantly impact inflammation in nerves and joints. So while there may be a mild local effect for some people, the idea that it's directly treating deeper inflammation when applied topically isn't well supported, unfortunately. And that gap between what's theoretically possible and what's actually happening is where people can start to overestimate what it's doing. But this is also where I see people get into a lot of trouble with application. Not too long ago, I had someone schedule a call with me after using frankincense mixed with castor oil, and she massaged it into her feet, which was fine. But then later, I guess she didn't wash her hands enough, and she wound up touching her face without thinking about it. And then with a short period of time, she developed a red, itchy rash across her whole face. Nothing severe long-term, but definitely uncomfortable and completely unexpected for her. And that's the part that people don't always think about. These oils don't just stay exactly where you put them. They transfer. They linger on your hands and your face, which is much more sensitive than the skin on your feet. So when you're using something like this, it's not just about whether it can be combined with castor oil. It's about how your skin responds, how often you're using it, and where it might end up unintentionally. So if you're going to use essential oils with castor oil, dilution matters. A few drops into a larger amount of castor oil is very different from using a heavier concentration. And I would still approach this as something that you test. Again, small patch test, not something that you assume is automatically helpful. Because again, for some people, it may feel fine. For others, especially over time, it can lead to irritation that wasn't there in the beginning. So with all of these, do a small patch test. That's going to be the theme for this video. Do a small patch test. And then if that's okay, proceed with caution and see how you do. Wasn't frankincense, wasn't that in the Bible with the 3 wise men? Isn't that what one of the precious oils, or I don't know what they were called, the anointing oils that they brought to Jesus when he was born? It was frankincense, myrrh, and what? Frankincense, myrrh, and it's been a while. If anybody knows, drop it in the comments. Frankincense, it's going to come to me randomly. At some point in this video, it's just going to pop into my head and I'm going to scream it out. Frankincense, myrrh. Frankincense, myrrh. There's another one. There's one more. It's going to drive me crazy. Anyway. All right. And speaking of patch tests, now we need to talk about DMSO, because this is a completely different category. DMSO is not just another oil or topical that you can layer on your skin. It is a solvent. And one of the reasons people use it is because it can carry substances through the skin and into the bloodstream. That's exactly why it gets attention. And if you've been in my comment section in any one of my videos on DMSO, you'll see there are so many people that just think that I am an alarmist. And I'm going to tell you the same thing I always tell you. DMSO is a solvent that at the very minimum, requires clean hands.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
All right. I'm not saying you have to sterilize your skin. And no, for those of you that are going to ask me, do not use alcohol swabs. I know there are all kinds of, cases for people saying, well, you use it to clean open wounds, and great. Just use soap and water. Just use plain, like a very plain soap and water. No fancy alcohol pads, no peroxide. They're all substances and solvents in their own right. So mixing them together is not really a good idea. So anybody in the comments that's going to tell me you put it on your horse, your dog, you don't wash your hands, you've never had a problem, you bathe in it, you drink it, all of that. Great. That is fantastic. But I cannot translate that to everyone that is potentially watching this video. I can't. I've done singular videos, standalone videos on DMSO if you want to check them out. But for a video that is going to have widespread views, I can't say that drinking DMSO or taking it orally or putting it in your eyes or any of the million other questions I get, I can't say that it's recommended.
Bummer.
I am, however, going to be doing a dedicated video on application for the eyes because it is such a common question I get.
Wait, I'm confused.
And I am currently right now sinking into the research for oral DMSO. And there are problems with it for various reasons. But I know I will have people in the comments saying, I take it all the time. Great. Moving on. Now, people hear that and they think, okay, well, this is going to help things absorb better. And technically it can, but that's also where the risk comes in. DMSO doesn't selectively carry only the thing that you want. As I've said a million times, it can carry other substances with it, including things on the surface of your skin that you didn't intend to introduce into your body. So when you start combining DMSO with something like castor oil, you're not just layering two products, you're potentially changing how and where that second substance is going in the body. And this is where people tend to oversimplify it. They think that if castor oil is helpful on the surface, then pulling it deeper must be better. And castor oil does have internal use. The only thing it is approved for by the FDA is as a stimulant laxative. So by all means, if you'd like to experiment with oral castor oil, let me warn you, you want to have a bathroom nearby. Anyway, so yes, deeper is not always better. It's just different. And with DMSO, you're dealing with something that has a much stronger effect on absorption than anything that we've talked about so far. There are also practical things people don't always consider. The skin needs to be clean before applying DMSO. I will go to my grave saying that, because anything on the surface, lotions, residues, trace contaminants, can potentially be carried through the skin. Just like with the other combinations, once you start mixing things, it becomes very difficult to know what's actually causing a benefit or causing a reaction. So this is not something that I would approach casually or experiment with by just mixing products together. If someone's choosing to use DMSO, it should be done in a very controlled and informed way, not as an add-on to something else without understanding how it changes the entire interaction. So when it comes to combining things with castor oil, the goal is not to stack as many products as possible and hope for a stronger effect. The goal is to understand what each thing is doing on its own first. Because once you start layering, you're changing how things are absorbed, how the skin reacts, and how long those effects are going to last. And at that point, it becomes very easy to misinterpret what's actually happening and what isn't. So some combinations are relatively low risk and reasonable to try if your skin tolerates them. Others fall into more of a gray area where you need to be a lot more intentional. And then there are things that really shouldn't be approached casually at all. Hello. Okay. Now, none of this means that you can't experiment. It's not what I'm saying. Sort of.
It kind of is, actually.
But anyway, it just means that you need to do it in a way that actually gives you useful information. One change at a time, small areas first. Pay attention to how your skin responds. Because the last thing you want is to end up with a reaction or no real benefit at all and have no idea which product caused it or isn't working. And that's really the takeaway here. Castor oil on its own may already be giving you the effect you're looking for. And if you're going to add something to it, it should be because you have a clear reason for doing it, not just because it sounds like it might work better. All right, thanks for being here. If you learned something or you know someone who could use this information, then like and share the video. It helps the channel tremendously. We also have a members community where you can get all kinds of benefits, and I want to really thank all of our current members, because without all of you, Lucid Med just wouldn't exist. So thank you for keeping the lights on. And I mean, there's over 350 videos. I want to say it's almost 400 videos currently on the channel. And you know, I may have covered a topic that would interest you. So rather than wait for the YouTube gods to decide what you see, head over to Lucid Med and just take a look for yourself. You can just kind of scan through all the videos and see if maybe there's something else there that you could use information on. And I will see you in the next one right here. Stay healthy and lucid.